IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am sorry I'm late, but there's just a lot going on right now that I am dealing with and getting ready. And so just had to put some final touches on a couple things. I've got an article that I got to still proof that Ryan just did on James Simon, recapping that visit. I'm actually going to text Ryan right now to go ahead and put that on the board real quick, because Notre Dame made a really nice move with James Simon this week. So I went ahead and just texted Ryan to go ahead and put that on the board. I'll publish the story later. You got to get that up. So if you're a member at boards.irishbreakdown.com, maybe the next 5 minutes or so, hopefully Ryan will have that up on the board and ready to go and talk about how things went with James Simon. So I still think that Notre Dame's got a hill to climb there, but they were no chance coming in, really very little chance coming into the visit. And I was, no, it's not happening. They're not going to get this kid. I still, if I was a betting man, I'm not picking Notre Dame, but Notre Dame made a major move this weekend. So still a lot of work to do. He's going to Texas this weekend. Texas is considered the leader. So we'll see how things went here and if they can kind of build on this momentum. So we'll see how it goes. But lots to talk about. We're not talking about that today. Today, we're going to talk about the Notre Dame Blue Gold game. We're going to preview that. Before we do, if you all could do me a big solid, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And if you have not done so, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Got some fun stuff coming on the podcast coming up. Going to make some changes to our formatting, which I think some of you are going to like. Getting feedback from it from those board members, it's going to be a lot of fun. Some very good ideas on that one so far. So let's get into the Notre Dame Blue Gold game. And we're going to just kind of give y'all some overviews. I'm going to go over the rosters and talk about, what units I think have some strengths and where there's some concerns about how the roster was constructed. Obviously, Notre Dame held their, Blue Gold game draft today. For some of you who are concerned or questioning, I've gotten actually some DMs and some texts about this. Hey, what about Chris Mitchell? What about this guy? What about that guy? Certain veterans were already put on teams. Riley Mills and Howard Cross were already on a team. Jack Kaiser and Chris Mitchell, guys like that, Tosh Baker, Jordan Patelho were already on teams. And so they were drafting knowing that they were already on that blue or gold team, and they were part of that process. So they did Notre Dame released an official roster. There was one trade. They traded Jaden Ausberry and Jalen Sneed. So Jaden Ausberry now goes to the gold team. Jalen Sneed goes to the blue team. So we have that one as well. So I'll talk about that. And the roster construction is very interesting. The blue team has the better roster in some areas. The gold team has the better roster in other areas. And, and I remember last year we were looking at the makeup of, I think it was the blue team was just like Tyler Buckner's team was loaded, and Sam Hartman was throwing to, Jaden Greathouse and some walk-ons. And then it ended up being Sam Hartman. I think it was Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas, and then walk-ons after that. And then the gold team actually was the one that ended up looking really good offensively. So they had the better line in the game. So it's going to be very interesting, and we'll dive into all that as we get going into this as well. I'm also then afterwards going to talk about what I'm looking for in the game. And I always tell you guys, spring games don't mean a whole lot. And that is also true this year. Notre Dame had their big scrimmage last week. We broke all that down. We talked about what we saw, and that's the one that's going to be a little bit more impactful as far as where things stand. And so you want to ask, why aren't all these players playing? The way it is for the blue gold game, anybody with a little bump and bruise, they basically hold out. I'm being a bit hyperbolic on that. And so when you see guys like Jadarian Price and Cam Williams, they're not major new injuries from what I'm told. They're just, anyone that's got something going on, we're just holding out from the game. And which I think is smart because they had their big scrimmage. That was on Saturday. And that was the one that's going to move the needle. However, this is a unique blue gold game in that there are some things I personally am very much looking forward to seeing. And a big reason for that is because of the depth of this team. And because, as I discussed in yesterday's show, there are still so many things that we have to learn about this football team. There are still questions that have to get answered. That's not something to be concerned about. I think that's true for a lot of people. But we're going to dive into just really kind of what I'm looking for And I'm curious when I get into these different aspects, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What are you looking to see? And what are the things that are going to tell you something about this football team? I would encourage all of us not to take too many big picture takeaways from this game. If a guy had a great spring and he doesn't play well in the blue gold game, I don't really care. If a guy had not a very good spring and he plays well in the blue gold game, I probably matter a little bit more to me just because I focus on the positive, but it doesn't move the needle for me. I like confirmation of things that I've seen, but there are some things that we've seen that are going to kind of tell us a little bit about who they are and where this team is at this point in time. So I'm very much looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive into the game a little bit, just some overview type of stuff. The game is going to be on Saturday on the Peacock Network. I believe the game starts at 1 p.m. I'm sure. I think you guys can all correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe the game starts at 1 p.m. on the Peacock Network. This is the 93rd edition of this, and this will be the third spring game of the Marcus Freeman era. The format in this one is team versus team. It's blue versus gold. I know in past years they've kind of had offense versus defense. This year it's going to be, blue versus gold. I haven't heard anything in regard to any scoring changes this year. My understanding is it's going to be a traditional scoring situation. Coach Freeman explained today that it is going to be a situation where they will kick off at the beginning, and then that will be the end of special teams for the game outside of PAT field goal. There will be no punting. If you choose to punt, the other team just gets the ball. It's basically a 40-yard punt. They treat it like a 40-yard net punt. So if you punt at your own 40, the other team gets it at the 20. If you punt at midfield, they get it at the 10. You also said they won't start a drive on that situation inside the 10. So if you punt from your 40 going in, they'll still give the ball at the 10. So those are just some little unique aspects of it. First half is going to be a normal 2-15 quarters. Last two quarters are going to be running clock. They did say that Coach Freeman can decide if it's like a kind of like a close situation in the last couple minutes, he can decide to have it be a normal 2-minute situation and not have a running clock. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. A lot of players not playing. Here's the list of guys that won't be playing in the game. Kevin Bauman, Charles Dew, Mitchell Evans, Aiden Gobira, Jaden Harrison, Riley Leonard, Benjamin Morrison, Armel Mookum, Styles Prescott, Jadarian Price, Leo Scheidler, Jaden Thomas, Logan Thomas, Cam Williams, and Keedron Young. Coach Freeman also said that there will be some players that will have green jerseys on, meaning they're playing on both teams, but the only player that we know of right now that will be playing for both teams is quarterback CJ Carr. That's the only one that was designated for that today. And for those that are wondering, Jordan Faison is on the blue roster. I put him at the bottom on the chart you're going to see on ours because just that's the roster he's on, but he will not be playing in the game on Saturday. So he's the one exception to that I have. The rest of the guys I have on the roster are guys that will only be playing in the game. So that's some of the do's and don'ts. Oh, blue team head coach is Al Washington. Gold team head coach is Dylan McCullough. This is This is the third year they've done this. And I believe Coach McCullough's team won it in 22. Coach Washington's unit won it last year. So this will be sort of the series victory of this, I believe. So we'll see how that one goes. So I'm looking forward to the game on Saturday. We'll be there. Irish Break obviously be there. I'll be there. Vince will be there. Sean Stires will be there. So let's dive a little bit into the rosters before we get into the what I'm looking for stuff. You will find this. We have a front page article at Irish Breakdown, the Athlon version, but this also is on our message board. So if you are a message board member and you want to see the rosters, you can go to the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, click on the Notre Dame Blue Gold game rosters, and you will see this there. So I'm just kind of go through the roster, give some of my overall impressions about each team, where it's weak, not where it's strong, where I have some questions. I shouldn't say weak because it's a spring game. You're always going to have a little bit of a depleted situation here. But you see the blue team. Steve Angeli was the quarterback. He was the number 1 overall draft pick. He will be wearing a red jersey. People have asked about that. Basically, as the veteran, they know who he is and what he can do, and he was live last year, and so he won't be live this year. And you will have CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie will be live, however. And so, as you see at the blue team, Steve Angeli's a starter. We'll also see CJ Carr playing for the blue team. Not the first time we've seen a quarterback play for both teams. We saw Drew Pine do that a couple years ago. Running back Jeremiah Love was the top pick in the running back draft part of it. He will also be joined by Aeneas Williams and Dylan Devizin. I should have had Aeneas Williams ahead of Dylan Devizin there. I went by number instead of the depth, which I did at other positions. So that is my fault on that one. But Jeremiah Love, Aeneas Williams, I'm very curious to see if they're going to use Jeremiah Love much at receiver in this game. So you look at the wide receivers and the tight ends. You've got Chris Mitchell, Jaden Greathouse, Deion Colsey. It's a good starting lineup right there. I mean, you'll have Chris Mitchell playing X, Jaden Greathouse playing the slot, Deion Colsey playing the boundary. Alex Whitman can play both outside spots as well. I'm curious if they're going to have some receivers playing both ways. That's going to be something I'm very curious to see, especially with so many guys being out. Tight end, Eli Raridan and Jack Larson are the scholarship players on there, and Yuri Yanishak is going to be part of that team too. Same with Charlie Selna. If you look at the two rosters, there's not that much debate that, at least on paper, that the blue team has the better collection of skill players. You've always got Jeremiah Love, and you've got Chris Mitchell, you've got Jaden Greathouse, Deion Colsey, Eli Raridan. It's a pretty stacked group. And then you look at the blue team, the rest of the blue team on offense. And now the way that I did this, I went left to right, and with what I project to be the starters, and then I have the backups below. So I don't put a lot of stock in the draft. It's kind of fun. I don't think anyone should get their feelings hurt. But there was one thing that when I first heard it kind of made me like, that's interesting. And I'll talk about that here when I get to the offensive line part. But basically the blue offensive line left to right is Sullivan Absher at left tackle, then Pat Coogan, Sam Pendleton, Billy Shrouth, who was the number one offensive lineman picked, and then the interior offensive lineman pick. I think they did tackles, then interior, and then Emil Wagner at right tackle. You also have Peter Jones and Ty Chan. Peter Jones is a guard. Ty Chan can play tackle or guard. So he'll be a little bit of a swing guy, I would imagine, in this game. They had, I think, Emil Wagner. When they did the offense interior position, Billy Shrouth was picked first by the blue team. And then the gold team, who already had Tosh Baker on their lineup and had Charles Jagasaw, picked Rocco Spindler first. So Coach McCullough and his guys picked Rocco Spindler first, which I was a little bit surprised by. I'm not going to lie to you that they did that, but that was the one that kind of was telling. And again, I had to tell myself, don't read into that because it really doesn't matter. They might have already, coordinated it beforehand. Who knows? But I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very interesting. And it just caught me at first. You have Billy Shrouth at right guard. He was the top interior pick. I'm looking forward to seeing Sam Pendleton. We'll discuss that a little bit. But, you got all those skill players, but this is the less experienced offensive line of the two. Let's go to the defensive line now. The defensive side of the ball for the blue team. You have R.J. Oben, who was already on the team. They picked Bryce Young when they had the defensive end draft. The Vipers, they took Boubacar Traore and Kobe Onyuke will be your two Vipers. Defensive tackle, Riley Mills is already part of the team. They also drafted Donovan Heinisch, Sean Sevillano, and Brennan Vernon. I would imagine this will give us a chance to see a decent amount of Brendan Vernon and Sean Sevillano in this game, for sure. Based on that, I don't expect Riley Mills or Howard Cross to play a ton in this game. And somebody asked if we have a proper pronunciation. I'm just going off of what the Notre Dame media guide says. I heard Marcus Freeman today pronounce Boubacar's name a little bit differently, but looking at the Notre Dame pronunciation guide, I'm going to actually pull it up again. Is it in this one? It might be in the other one that they sent, but it looked like it was Traore is how they have it in the pronunciation guide. So yeah, I'm just going to continue to go with that one. And here it is. There it is right here. So you've got, it says Boubacar Traore. So TRAY-OR-EEE is what they have in the pronunciation guide. So that's what I'm going with on that one. Cause I heard Coach Freeman say Treo, and I wonder if that was, sometimes they'll give nicknames or whatever. Maybe that was a nickname. The linebacking core, and so I'll explain why I think the trade was made. This is why I say sometimes I think these things are somewhat predetermined, or not necessarily, but sometimes they're going to leave it up to the guys to draft, and then they'll fix it if they want to, as Marcus Freeman said. But Jack Kaiser was part of that team. They drafted. It was the gold team drafted, I think, Jalen Sneed first, if I remember correctly. Some of you were in there. You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was Jalen Sneed got picked first. And then the blue team took Drake Bowen. And then the gold team took, I can't forget, but the blue team then took Jaden Alsbury. And Marcus Freeman was going to vetoed that. And then they made a post trade. So I think what they were basically trying to do, this is my read, this is my opinion. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just giving my opinion. Is basically they wanted to kind of get the quote unquote current first team linebacking core together, because Coach Freeman said he was going to talk to Coach Golden about that. And so right now, Jack Kaiser, Drake Bowen, and Jalen Sneed are the quote unquote first team linebacking core as of right now. And then the gold team will have that second group. So that's the only thing that I can think of as to why they did that. And then also, that's the only thing I can think of as to why they did that. I'm sure there's other reasons, using him in certain packages, or maybe they want to play him inside a little bit more, which they would have. They're going to be able to do with the blue team because Jack Kaiser may not play as much, and they have the nickel on this team. I'm not quite sure, but that's kind of my read of it. Preston Zinner was the other linebacker, and Jerry Rulo, who's a walk-on, was on that. There's only one nickel right now, which is Jordan Clark. Because of all the injuries at corner, they've had to move Micah Bell outside. So Jordan Clark will be the one nickel. I won't be shocked if he plays both sides, honestly, and it would make sense because you can mix between base and nickel, and then he can just kind of work in. So it won't shock me at all if Jordan Clark's one of those guys wearing a green jersey on Saturday. Looking at the safety position, you got Luke Talich and Ben Minnick. This is a big opportunity for those guys. I mean, the safety depth chart is really light. I'm very curious what they're going to do at safety. I would imagine Marty Auer might play a little bit of safety, even though they listed him at corner. He's a guy that's played safety in the past, but you've got two guys that are coming off injuries as your only safeties. I would imagine that we'll see something. Somebody at safety is going to probably be wearing a green jersey and playing both ways. That would be my best guess. Jaden Mickey and Micah Bell are the two scholarship corners for the blue team, and you've got Marty Auer, as I mentioned, Mickey and Mickey Brown. You got Mitch Jeter is your kicker. He was already on the blue team. Actually, I didn't listen to the draft part of specialists because I had to go run and jump in a meeting real quick. But I believe Mitch Jeter was the only specialist for the blue team that was already on that team. I don't know that he was drafted. I'd have to go back and look at that again. You on the chat that listened to it could maybe correct me on that one a little bit, but that was kind of my thought on that. So that's the blue team. Let's get into the gold roster. So let's actually do this. Strengths of the blue team. Obviously, offensive skill. There's some really good offensive skill on the blue team. Offensive line, some younger guys especially on the outside. So it's going to be a great chance for Billy Schrouth for Sullivan Absher and Emil Wagner to get a chance to play a lot and show themselves in certain ways. I'm very much looking forward to seeing Boubacar. See, this was the ones where it's like you kind of look at the matchups and you're going to see Boubacar and going against Charles Jagasaw, which we'll talk about in the next section. That was interesting. But you look at the defensive line, they've got RJ Oben, Bryce Young, Boubacar, Riley Mills, Donovan Heinisch. Front seven for the blue team has a chance to be pretty decent as well, in my opinion. You've got the starting linebackers. The secondary, a little bit more shaky. You've got the second team players across the board outside of maybe Jaden Mickey, who could end up being a starter this year, especially with Benjamin Morrison's shoulder injury being a bit of an unknown. So, it's kind of like it's not so much, hey, you've got this squad, but what are you going against? And the blue team has the better offensive skill set, but I would argue that the gold team has the better defensive skill set, which is going to create for a really, really good matchup. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And that's the strengths of and the concerns about the blue team. Let's go to the gold roster. Kenny Minchie is going to be the quarterback for the gold team. You also have CJ Carr playing there. Running back, it's Jabron Payne and Justin Fisher. I would not be at all shocked if we see a situation where Aeneas Williams is playing for both teams. I won't be shocked at all to see that. Wide receiver, very thin receiving core for the gold team. You've got KK Smith, Micah Gilbert, Jack Polian. This is a great opportunity for Micah Gilbert and KK Smith and Kenny Minchie. Tight end, you've got Cooper Flanagan, Davis Sherwood. Keep an eye on Henry Garrity on Saturday, folks. I'm just telling you guys right now. I won't be shocked if Henry makes some plays, especially in the second half. Offensive line for the Gold team, you've got at least three of your expected starting offensive linemen for the season. You've got Charles Jagasaw left or right. Charles Jagasaw left guard or left tackle. Rocco Spindler, I would assume, is going to be at left guard. Ashton Craig at center. Christopher Tarrick, I assume, will be at right guard. And Tosh Baker at right tackle. What's the first thing you guys notice when you look at that offensive line, the projected starting offensive line for the Gold team on Saturday? What's the first thing you guys notice? I'm going to give you a second to respond. And it's not the 3 of the 5 starters. What's the first thing when you guys look at that offensive line, you think, what is your first thought? I'll tell you what mine is. Kenny Minchie's offensive line is going to be flipping huge. I mean, you're talking left to right. Jagasaw 6'7", 329. Rocco's 6'5", 324. Ashton Craig's the little guy at 6'4", 308. Christopher Tarrick is 6'5", 331. And Tosh Baker's 6'8", 321. His offensive line is huge. Jabron Payne should have some holes to run through, I would think, in this game, or I hope he's going to have some holes to run through in this game because that offensive line is massive, absolutely massive. And then, of course, you've got your 2 younger offensive linemen that are coming off the bench, or your 2 smallest offensive linemen in Joe Wadding, who I still don't know that Joe Wadding's 297 pounds. And then, of course, Anthony Knapp at 6'4", 276. That is a monster offensive line for Notre Dame. Go to the other side of the ball. Let's look at the defense for the Gold team. And you've got Josh Burnham was the top pick at the defensive end position. He will be there. He'll be opposite Jordan Patel-Ho. You've also got Junior Tuihalamaka there at the Viper position. Then a couple walk-ons, Grant Ristoff and Eric Lindstrom. Grant Ristoff was a transfer from, I believe, Princeton. Maybe Penn. I think it was Princeton. That is part of the Notre Dame team, and he'll be the number 2 defensive end. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we see a little bit of Bryce Young in the second half, playing a little bit of both ways. I could see a little bit. That's just, again, my opinion. Defensive tackle, Howard Cross is on the team. They drafted Jason Onye. It was the number 1 pick of the defensive tackles. Also got Devin Houston and Cole Mullins. It would appear that Notre Dame has moved Cole Mullins inside. I have no clue why. I am not going to get into that today because I just want today to be a happy show. But it just makes no sense to me why that is the case, because he's 245 pounds. He was a middle linebacker most of his career. Whatever. It is what it is. But he has had a good spring. It is what it is. We'll talk another time, another place. Linebacker, you got Kingston Viliama-Asa was the top pick of the Gold team, the Gold staff, which I thought was very interesting. And then you have Jaden Alsbury. Was originally drafted by the Blue team. He was traded to the Gold team, and he will now be there with Kahan Okia and Trey Reeder. Very curious to see how that lineup goes and who plays where as part of that group. I would like to see Preston Zinner wearing a green jersey and getting a chance to play both. I think he did that again last year, and I wouldn't mind seeing him do that again this year. Get a chance to see a little bit of Trey Reeder. The secondary for the Gold team is pretty good. When you look at this, you've got obviously Xavier Watson and Don Schuler at safety. You also have Kennedy Urlacher, Devin Ford. I have to think one of those guys is going to play both ways. Yeah. So, I have no idea. Of course, 99 problems. People are going to say they're moving inside because there's just people that are going to agree everything the Notre Dame staff does is perfect and correct, and they don't ever do anything wrong. So, of course, it was a perfect move, and there's no reason to question it ever. I get it. Should never question the coaches. Got it. When you look at the secondary for the Gold team, Xavier Watson, Don Schuler, I have to think that Kennedy Urlacher is going to have a chance to maybe play both ways. I'd be curious to see if he's going to get a chance to do a little bit of that. I could see that. Devin Ford, currently listed as safety. Hey, look, he's another guy. Maybe he might carry the rock a little bit on Saturday. Who knows? But I think he'll most likely stick on defense. Cornerbacks, you've got Christian Gray, Chance Tucker, and Isaiah Dunn. So obviously the one cornerback position, this is a great chance for Chance Tucker to really solidify himself as a guy that can battle for really go out there and compete for, hey, I can be that guy. You don't need to go get a transfer guy. I can be that guy. He'll get a chance to do that. I'm curious to see where they're going to play the corners because they drafted Christian Gray and Chance Tucker. Well, based on the current depth chart with Benjamin Morrison out, they're both boundary guys. But when Benjamin Morrison comes back, Christian Gray is going to probably have a great shot to be your starter at the field corner position. So for the blue gold game, do they play Christian at field and Chance in the boundary? Do they move Chance to field and let Christian play the boundary? Do they move them back and forth? And we'll find out. I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. And then the specialist, you have Eric Goyens, who is the punter, and Zach Yoakum is the kicker. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see how this game plays out. I really, it is fascinating that, it just worked out that way, I guess. That's why I said sometimes I wonder if these things are kind of somewhat predetermined, but how you have the blue team is really loaded at skill positions. The gold team is loaded on defensive skill positions. The blue team, there's some question marks about the defensive skill positions. And then you don't have any projected starters on the gold team at the skill positions on offense. However, I am very much looking forward to seeing some of those guys. So we're going to see how it all shakes out. But when I get into kind of, what I'm looking for in the game, I'll dive more into some of the individual players. But just the matchups that I think are most intriguing in this game, as I mentioned, the blue team skill players, which as you look here, it's Jaden Greathouse, it's going to be Chris Mitchell, Deion Colsey, and Eli Raridan going against Xavier Watts, Don Schuler, Kennedy Urlacher, Christian Gray, Chance Tucker. I think that's going to be a really fascinating one. And then the other one that I'm looking forward to is the fact that Charles Jagasaw and Tosh Baker are your starting offensive tackles, projected offensive tackles for the Notre Dame football team. They're on the gold team, and we're going to get to see them battle against the blue team ends, which are RJ Oben and Bryce Young at the defensive end position, and then Boubacar Traore. And that's going to be a very fascinating battle. I'll explain why when I get into my what I'm looking for section. But that's definitely one that I'll have my eye on. When the gold team is on the field, yes, I'm going to want to see KK Smith, who y'all know I'm very high on, and Micah Gilbert and all those type of players. But I am going to be spending a little bit extra time watching that battle between the gold defensive line or offensive line and the blue defensive line. It's going to be very interesting. Plus, they have obviously the starting line, projected starting linebackers for the team there as well. So I'm very, very, very curious to see how that battle goes. It's going to be a fun part of it. But I like how the rosters are shaking out. I think it's a little bit more even than it was last year. Strengths at one spot compared to others. Both teams have areas where they're definitely a lot stronger than other positions. Skill players on blue, offensive line on gold. You look at the defensive side of the ball, you've got the front seven for the blue team looks stronger. The secondary for the gold team looks stronger. It's I think they did it pretty well. Now, maybe it just happened by chance, and props to Al Washington and Dylan McCullough for making that happen that way. But it's going to be a fun game. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to shape up. But of course, last year was like 27-0, and the team that we all thought was going to get destroyed is the team that won 27-0. So who knows, folks? It's a spring game, but I'm looking forward to being there. Looking forward to seeing this team in action. So that's what we saw from that. So that's the rosters, and all we've talked about the blue gold game. Next, I'm going to dive into sort of what I'm looking for. I'm going to spend some time on the offense, and spend some time on the defense, and dive into the things that I'm looking for, and really what I think are areas that I'm going to have some takeaways and have some interesting takeaways. But more so when the game's going on, this is what I want to see from both sides of the ball. Not so much from I want to see them run this or run that, but more so I'm curious to see this player. I'm curious to see this position group and those type of things. Before we get into that, do me a favor, folks. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And if you have not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's a great way to support Irish Breakdown. If you're just someone who only listens to podcasts and our shows, but you want to support the channel, which we appreciate, it helps us to continue to grow, you can sign up for the message boards and go that route. If you're, even if you're not a message board person, it's a way to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown, and we greatly, greatly appreciate that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So next part of today's show, I'm going to dive into kind of what I'm looking for from the game. And it's not so much, I want to see the offense on this team have X number of rushing yards or X number of passing yards, or I want to see this guy have 18 tackles, or I want to see Mike Denbrock call this play or that scheme. It's more so looking at the team and evaluating the positions and the players that I am going to put more stock in to say, that guy did something, or is that guy going to do something now that there's a little bit of a spotlight on him? And those are the different aspects of what I'm very curious to see in this game, more so than a lot of years. And I'll be honest, why part of it is because there is so much young talent on this team. And we always, as a fan base, and I think this is true of most fan bases I know, there's always some sort of intrigued by the younger players, the guys we haven't seen before, right? Like the players that have played a lot, we've seen them play. We know their strengths, we know their weaknesses. Sometimes we can obsess on their weaknesses, and then we look at this kid who's never played. He was a highly ranked recruit. He doesn't have the flaws. He hasn't been beat for a touchdown before. He's never dropped a pass. He's never missed a block. He's never missed a tackle. He's never thrown an incompletion in the game. You know what I mean? And so there's that unknown that intrigues us. And that's always true. But with this team, it's a little bit different because it's not just the unknown. It's the fact that this group of unknowns, in my opinion, is so talented. And also because a lot of the youth on this football team is going to have a big impact this season. So, I'll talk about the quarterback here in a little bit when I get to the offense, but it's that's not a position where right now we know for a fact that youth is going to have to be served. And maybe it does, but hopefully it doesn't. But there's other positions where linebacker, you're going to need younger guys to play. Safety, you're going to need younger guys to play. Offensive line, you're going to need some younger guys to play. Other positions, you don't need young guys to play a defensive tackle, but if guys step up, that's always a good thing. And so it creates different expectations when you look at the spring and different areas of focus when you're watching the game. And that's why, for me, there are different things I'm looking for. And if Jack Kaiser doesn't play well in the blue gold game, I don't care. If Jack Kaiser has 15 tackles in the blue gold game, I don't care. I already know who Jack Kaiser is. He's a 3-year starter. We know who he is. If Xavier Watts, like when Jaden Mickey had the pick six in the scrimmage last week, and I was like, wow, what a play. When Xavier Watts did it, you're like, oh, what time is it? 2:15? Okay. Yeah, because you're like, okay, yeah, that's Xavier Watts. He's an All-American. We know that's what he does. And so there's always kind of those reactions. And there are just some things that I just don't really – I'm just not going to be necessarily moved by because, oh, wow, Howard Cross and Riley Mills played really well. Shocker. It's the unknowns. It's the question marks. It's the guys we're not sure of. And this is going to be the last sort of taste that they're going to leave in our mouths as a football team, where we're going to go out and say, okay, this is the last time we're going to see these guys until August. And so the rest of it is, this is what we got. When we meet back next week at Irish Breakdown with you guys, and we're doing shows and we're breaking this team down and we're going to the summer, it's all built off of what we think about this team based on what we've seen in the past. We're not going to see anything new until we get to August. And so that's part of the fun of this day as well. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So that's what makes it intriguing. I'm going to start it off with the offense, because I think the offense has a lot more of the type of situations, the questions. How's this guy going to play? How's that guy going to do? Can this guy help you? Can that guy help you? And so I think a lot of people are going to have that when it comes to the offense. With the defensive line, there's always, or defensive side of the ball, there's going to be things we're looking for, but there's a lot more answers. And this is what I talked about yesterday. But I'm just going to say it right now. The first position that I'm going to be looking at on Saturday is quarterback. And I can tell by a lot of the responses in the chat that a lot of you guys are going to focus on that position as well. I want to put a warning out to all of us that when you look at this team, this game, don't put too much stock in what happens in this game from a declarative standpoint. I saw this. That means this guy is going to be great or this guy is going to be bad. Because I remember in 2014, so actually spring of 2015, and I had this argument with people all offseason. I had the audacity in 2015 to say if Malik Zaire gets hurt, and I hope he doesn't, but if Malik Zaire gets hurt, I think they're going to be fine at quarterback because I think Deshaun Kaiser can play. How can you say that? Did you not watch the blue gold game? He was terrible in the blue gold game. And I said, I don't care about the blue gold game. I really don't. Meaning, if a guy plays great, it's confirmation of what you already knew. But if you don't think a guy can play going into the game, you shouldn't necessarily change your mind coming out of it. Otherwise, you'd think Junior Jabby's going to be a breakout. You think Nate Montana's about to be a breakout. You get what I'm saying? And a guy like Deshaun Kaiser goes out there in the blue gold game. He's terrible. Deshaun Kaiser ended up being pretty good that year. So I just don't put a lot into that. But I can't deny that I'm going to definitely have my eye on the quarterback position just because I want to see how they handle it. It's just another data point. And I actually think the guy with the biggest opportunity on Saturday is Kenny Minchey. Because when you look at the rosters, and I pulled them up earlier, and I'll pull it up again so we can kind of look at it. But you look at the skill talent around Steve Angeli on offense. When you look at this blue team, he's going to have Jeremiah Love, which is your projected starting running back, or at least 1A or 1B of a 1B situation. You're going to have Chris Mitchell, who's projected to be your starting Z. You're going to have Jaden Greathouse, who's projected to be your number one receiver. You're going to have Deion Colsey, who's battling to be a starter in the boundary. You're going to have Eli Raridan, who's a dude. So there's a lot of skill talent around Steve Angeli in the game. And then, of course, when CJ Carr's in there, then you look at the gold team, and his running back is the guy that's their third running back. The next running back on the gold team is a walk-on who's a good football player, but had been playing tight end his first 2 years at Notre Dame, and Justin Fisher. Your receivers are KK Smith and Micah Gilbert, who I'm very high on, but your only other receiver is Jack Polian. And then you have Cooper Flanagan, Davis Sherwood, and Henry Garrity there. So you could say, well, it's kind of stacked in the favor of Steve Angeli. Well, that's the way the draft went. But to me, I think this is a great opportunity for Kenny Minchey because you won't be able to say, well, of course he played well. Look at the loaded team he was playing on. He's going to have to manage the offense. He's going to have to, get in the right checks. As I said last Saturday in the scrimmage, the best play that Kenny Minchey made all day, in my opinion, was a run check that he made. Just because he saw it, he reacted to it, he showed command, he got everybody he needed to get to, and he got the right call in, and they got positive yards. And so I'm very curious to see Kenny get a shot to lead the gold offense. I'm looking forward to seeing CJ do the same thing with this team. And so it's going to be a chance for him to kind of say, hey, look, things are stacked against me. Let's see how he responds. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how Kenny responds. Now, if he doesn't play well, it's not going to be something that I say, well, Kenny had a shot. It's over. See you later. Go transfer somewhere. I'm not going to say that. Because it's a spring game, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. If Kenny plays well, if CJ plays well, I'm just going to be honest. It's going to tell me a little something. And just like the first time that I really thought, Steve Angeli might be a little bit better than I thought he was in a spring game. Even though I always say, don't put too much in spring games. They're not to be completely ignored. And it wasn't that, Steve Angeli led the team on a game-winning drive. It was the manner in which he did it, just cool and calm and just no, not being shook at all. That meant something to me. And now Kenny and CJ get their chance, and Kenny especially on the gold team. CJ, I'm very curious to see how he handles the two ways. How does he handle being on the blue team and then the gold team? He's going to have completely different receivers in both situations. How does he handle it? Who leads the offense on scoring drives? Because you could see a situation where CJ has a touchdown on the blue team and a touchdown on the gold team. How does that work? But I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing what Kenny and CJ do in this game. And as I said, Kenny's going to have a chance to move the needle a little bit, I would say, but just put a data point together to say, hey, look, y'all can talk about Steve's experience and you can talk about CJ being a 5-star. Both of those things are true in my opinion. But don't forget about me because I can sling this thing too. I can lead this offense. I can make the necessary reads. I can get the ball where it needs to get to. And I'm very much looking forward to see him do that. And that kind of leads into the next point of what I want to see from this game. When I saw that the gold team was KK Smith and Micah Gilbert, I had two reactions. Number one is, well, that's a little bit of an uneven receiving core. So when I saw the draft, I was like, well, I just assumed that meant Chris Mitchell was probably going to be on the gold team, because why would you have Jaden Greathouse, Deion Colsey, on and then also have Chris Mitchell? Well, I was incorrect. Chris Mitchell was already on the blue team. And so you've got KK Smith and Micah Gilbert. Based on this, I think we'll see a little bit of maybe two tight end looks with this group. But when you are in a three tight end look, Jack Polian's been a slot guy so far. So you'll see KK Smith playing a little bit of Z. KK's been back and forth between Z and slot this spring. I'm telling you guys, I've been very impressed with KK this spring when we've seen him. I was impressed with him last weekend. I've heard a lot of good things about what he's doing at Notre Dame. I think this is a great chance for KK to go out there and kind of make his presence felt, kind of like Jaden Greathouse did last year in the blue gold game. But I really am looking forward to seeing KK get his chance to kind of go off a little bit and make some plays and battle against the blue team corners. And the same thing for Micah Gilbert. Like Micah had a great spring. I thought he struggled last weekend in the scrimmage. This is a bit of a bounce back opportunity for him. How does he handle it? And how does he handle kind of, did he bounce back with a good week of practice? Does he finish things off in a strong note? Very much looking forward to seeing that. And then, of course, Cooper Flanagan's another guy that had a spring. But I'll say it again, when you look at the pass catchers, keep an eye on Henry Garrity at tight end. I like this kid. I do. I don't think he's ready to help them right now, but I think he's got a chance to somewhere down the road be a guy that's part of the Notre Dame rotation at tight end. I'm very curious to see if they're going to get a chance to get him some footballs. But when you look at this great opportunity for KK Smith and Micah Gilbert, but I still am, I want to see what they do at the other position too. I want to see that, can Deion Colsey, who hasn't had a bad spring, hasn't had a great spring. I haven't heard anything bad about his spring. I haven't heard anything raving about his spring. We saw the blue gold. We saw the jersey scrimmage last week. Deion didn't do a whole lot. Micah Gilbert didn't do a whole lot. Can Deion finish the spring off on a high note and put himself in position to go into the summer and the fall saying, hey, look, you guys can talk about this guy and that guy, but I'm going to be the starting boundary this year. I want to see Deion be that guy. I want to see him play with some urgency. I want to see him play with some confidence and some, hey, I want to be here. I want to be great. I want to be that guy and just show something, show me something. I want to see that from him. Jaden Greathouse, honestly, don't care what he does in the spring game. If he goes off again, it's like, okay, another day where Jaden Greathouse went off. Chris Mitchell's a guy that I'm honestly, it doesn't move the needle because I've seen so much film of him, but we just haven't seen a lot of him so far for Notre Dame. Doesn't mean a whole lot because we talked about this. We talked about this in during the week. It's like, does him doing a whole lot in the spring game mean, okay, he's a great player? Not necessarily. Does him not doing anything in the spring game mean that I should just ignore that I watched him go off on Arkansas last year? Also, no. It's more confirmation. Like, okay, I'm glad I got a chance to see him go off a little bit. Glad I got a chance to see Chris make some plays. I'm glad I got a chance to see Chris use his speed against Notre Dame, Notre Dame players, because we saw that in the first practice. But as I said at the time, it was non-padded, so it's advantage offense. I want to see Chris use his speed to make some plays in a more live situation. So the receiving core is still, as I said yesterday, a work in progress. There's a lot of talent there, but there's still a lot of questions there. And so when there's questions, that means there's opportunities for players that maybe aren't as solidified in a spot to make their mark and leave that lasting impression. Because coaches can tell you all they want. They don't care a whole lot about a spring game. But that doesn't mean if a guy goes out there and goes off that they don't take notice. And, as I said, I'll use KK Smith as an example for the gold team. If KK Smith, who's had a good spring, goes out there and all of a sudden KK is hey, I'm out here making some plays, man. I'm out here doing some things. Does that's going to mean something to me? That's going to mean something to me, and so I'm very much looking forward to seeing that. Some people kind of singing like it's a setup. Hey, folks, these teams were drafted number one, number two. Micah Gilbert was the number one boundary receiver last week, and also as we said, the blue team only has 3 scholarship receivers that are going to be playing. The gold team only has 2. The gold team has a little bit of an advantage at tight end. They have 2 scholarship tight ends. The blue team only has 1 that's not a true freshman. The gold team also has the best offensive line. And I'm going to ask you here, if you're a quarterback in this kind of setting, would you rather have Jabron Payne, KK Smith, Micah Gilbert, Cooper Flanagan, and that offensive line, or the other skill players in the offensive line they had? Because remember, we were here last year. Remember the stacked blue team that we had last year that was Tyler Eifert's team or Tyler Buckner's team. And Sam Hartman was with, it was like Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, and like another walk-on. I think it was in the starting lineup last year with them. And what offense dominated? It was the offense that had the better offensive line. And so it's going to be interesting. And that's why I think for me, I understand, like Jay Patterson, you said you're joking, but I kind of had that same thought though. I mean, we're humans, right? We have that initial thought. But I also, when you think about it, you start thinking like, man, this is a great opportunity for Kenny. Because if Kenny can move the ball with Jabron Payne and KK Smith and Micah Gilbert and Cooper Flanagan, start saying like, okay, this kid has to put this group on his shoulders a little bit. And I think that's something that Notre Dame wants to see from Kenny. I think Notre Dame wants to see Kenny be a little bit more of a take charge kind of guy. Kenny is a very calm, polite kid and a little funny and sarcastic, according to some people, like great personality. But sometimes the concern can maybe be, is he a little too laid back? And this is a chance for Kenny to kind of take charge. And I'm hoping that he gets a chance to do that. So the wide receiver position is certainly a big question for me. Offensive line-wise, a lot to evaluate there. How does Charles Jagasaw do against the edge players for the blue team? As you can see there, Charles Jagasaw, and Tosh Baker are the gold team tackles. When you go up here against the blue team, it's RJ Oben, Bryce Young, and Boubacar Traore. 3 of your 4 most physically gifted pass rushers, 3 of your 5, you could throw Jordan Patel in there. The 3 of your 5 most physically gifted pass rushers, and arguably your 2 most naturally gifted pass rushers, are going to be on the blue team. You're going to be going up against the starting offensive tackles. So this battle, to me, we're going to look at from 2 different ways. I'll talk about the defensive side of it in the next segment. But for these 2 guys, look, Boubacar put some work in on Charles Jagasaw in the scrimmage on Saturday. Beat him 2 or 3 times on one or 2 in like 2 series in a row. And I'm curious how Charles Jagasaw responds to that. I am. I want, Jordan Tosh Baker, I've heard, has had some issues a little bit with speed this spring. How does he handle the speed that group is going to go at him? I think that matchup is going to be very important for me to see. I want to see that those guys can handle those matchups, that they can win some of those matchups. They can get a push in the run game in some of those matchups. Is also something I'm very much looking forward to seeing. Just the overall evaluation of the offensive line is one where it's still a work in progress. You've got Emil Wagner. He's going to get a chance to go against, a group of defensive ends that are also quality players. He's going to be going up against Josh Burnham and Jordan Patelho. It's a big spring for Emil Wagner. And this is a big spring game for Emil Wagner because he's a guy that we all know has lots of talent, but he's also a guy that just hasn't been able to put it together. Can he end the spring off on a strong note? I'm curious to see that because at the end of the day, I don't care as much about the play of the offensive line from the standpoint of, did they play as a unit? Were they perfect in their assignments? I mean, those things as a coach, you always look at, evaluate, teach, and correct, but they're not necessarily needle movers for me because I have the whole practice. But I do think it's important to see guys compete. I do think it's important to see the guys are going out there playing aggressively, playing with a little bit of fire, playing with a little bit of want to, playing with a little bit of, hey, I'm still – because here's the thing. Spring games don't matter a ton, but if you're in a position battle, you're putting the helmets and pads on. It's a chance for you to make an impression. And Emil Wagner, as far as we know, has a chance to battle Tosh Baker. I don't think right now that he's done anything to make anyone think he's going to win that job right now. But this is another chance for him to say, hey, don't write me off just yet. I'm going to go out there and play really well in the spring game, and then I'm going to carry that into the fall, and I'm going to push for the starting job. That would be great, because even if he doesn't beat Tosh out, if we get the best version of Emil Wagner in the fall, and Tosh Baker's your starter or right tackle, and there was a real competition, that means Tosh also took a big jump and is becoming the player that a lot of us hoped he would be. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that battle. I think the same thing is true inside. You've got Rocco's. I'm really curious. Like, I just want to see Rocco Spindler and Charles Jagasol playing side by side. We talked about that earlier in the week on a show, and we got into a little bit of the, if Rocco wins that job, think about the beef that's on the left side of that line. Well, we're going to get a chance to see what that looks like in the spring game. And I'm very curious to see how much run game that Mike Denbrock calls, either to the left for the non-zone plays, but then right to the right on the inside zone plays, because inside zone to the right is going to cut back to the left, and that's ideally where you want that run to hit. You want inside zone to hit backside behind those blockers. So very curious to see how much we see of that from Mike Denbrock with that offensive line. Jabron Payne, who's your hammer back, kind of how he does. You've got Justin Fisher, who's 6'2", 220 plus, running behind that line. Very much looking forward to seeing that. And if they can establish a run game, then that creates some opportunities where maybe out of some 12 personnel, 11 personnel looks, that they can create some play action opportunities for Kenny Minchie to go deep. And but it's going to really come down to the offensive line. And then for the blue offensive line, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to get a chance to see Emil Wagner finish strong. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Subban Absher does. He's a guy that intrigues me. I'd like to see him kind of finish the spring off on a strong note and see if he can kind of say, hey, look, I played in a way this spring that, you need to think about me maybe being in competition for one of these starting jobs here, either this year, or potentially Sullivan can put himself in position, even if he doesn't start this year, to go out next spring as a redshirt sophomore with 3 years left and grab hold of a spot next spring. So very interested to see how he's going to do. And just the other part to me is, does the offensive line show any growth from what we saw a week ago in as a unit, and then also as an individual group? Something very much I'm looking forward to seeing. And then the last part for me is, I want to see what Mike Denbrock shows in the spring game. Like, we're not going to get the whole repertoire, right? We're not going to get the whole arsenal of plays. But I am curious to kind of see what Coach Denbrock does in regard to what does he show. Because you don't want to give too much away, but at the end of the day, they have all the film that he had at LSU. I promise you, Texas A&M's not only watching all of last year's film, but they're probably watching 2021 Cincinnati film. And if they're smart, they are, because they're going to look at that and say, well, they had a lot more tight ends at Cincinnati in 2021 than what Denbrock had at LSU, and Notre Dame's going to have a lot of tight ends. So we're going to see, we're going to need to know what he does 12 personnel wise to be ready for that. And Mike Elko is going to think that. So we'll see some Cincinnati film. So there's not going to be anything that Notre Dame's going to do that's like, wow, we didn't know they were running that concept. So, I mean, you show your stuff to a degree, but there's going to be some wrinkles that you have that maybe you want to say for Texas A&M, or maybe you want to say for Purdue or somebody like that. And so you're not going to, you've been working on, and I'm completely making this up, but you've got some reverse throwback, whatever pass that you want to do. You're not going to show that if you actually want to run it. If you have no intention of running like that, you may show it just to have some fun. And maybe give some things to think about. But I'm very curious to see kind of what we see, especially in the run game, because that's more so where you're going to start to see what Coach Denbrock believes this offense is good at running the football. Are we going to see a heavy zone team? Are we going to see a little bit more misdirection, counter, pin and pull type stuff that Joe Rudolph likes to do, which we could argue maybe the offensive line, well, I don't think maybe the offensive line last year wasn't really ideally suited for if you were running it with someone other than Joe Alt as part of that movement. So I'm curious to see what he's going to show. Very curious to see what he's going to show this spring. That's going to do it for the offensive side. I'm curious what you guys think. Leave your comments in the chat. Of course, we'll continue this conversation on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I want to see what you guys are looking for on Saturday. What are the things that when you watch the game, beyond just generally watching it, what are the things you hope to see out of it? For me, I hope to see the young quarterbacks show me something as throwers and with just command of the offense. I want to see the receivers make plays. We didn't see anyone other than the Jaden Greathouse make a lot of plays last week. I want to see them win some of those contested throws that the defense won those battles last week. Those are all things that I'm looking forward to seeing from the game this Saturday. We talked about that, offensive line, how they move. I'm curious what you guys think. What do you guys want to see from the Notre Dame offense this Saturday? What are the things you're really zeroing in on and saying, okay, this is what I'm focused on as we get our last chance to see this team perform this spring? So let me know in the comment section. Let me know on the message board. We'll have a lot to talk about. Going to be a lot of fun. We're going to go to defense next, folks, but hit that like button before we get out of here. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. We would love and greatly appreciate a 5-star review. If you are a podcast listener, obviously make sure that you're downloading our episodes and helping us get those views and making sure that we're able to continue that in light of all the changes that Apple has made recently and how they change download numbers. So we could use your help getting those numbers back up. Would greatly appreciate that. Share it with your friends. If you have Notre Dame friends who don't listen to Irish Breakdown, tell them they're missing out. They need to check out what we're doing. Definitely do that. And of course, as I said, as always, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Final piece of today's show is going to look at the Notre Dame defense. And we do have a super chat. I'll get to that at the end of the show, but we'll talk about that at the end. Did not miss that, Aaron Schmidt. We'll get to your super chat, which I appreciate. Defensively, it's funny. There's actually a lot that I'm looking for on defense to see. It's nothing that's going to make me change what I think about this team on defense. As far as I don't know that there's anything I could see outside of an injury that would make me less confident in the defense. If the receiving core goes out there on Saturday and they're dropping balls and they're not competing for footballs and they're not able to get off the line of scrimmage, that's going to make me a little bit nervous. I'm not going to deny that. That's going to make me a little bit nervous. If it's a back and forth and they win some, they lose some, that's exactly how it should be when you're going against really good defensive backs. But if they're just getting their butts whooped, it's going to be a concern. And if one guy goes off but everybody else is struggling, that's a concern. If the offensive line just getting their butts kicked the entire day, that's a little bit of a concern because those are position groups that are a little bit, they're just unproven in a lot of ways. This offensive line has only played one game together. This receiving core, you've got a lot of guys that have made plays at other times, but, we've never seen Chris Mitchell catch a pass at Notre Dame. We're not going to get a chance to see Bo Collins catch one this spring, and we've never seen him catch one at Notre Dame. We've never seen Micah Gilbert catch one at Notre Dame. There's still a lot of question marks about how good can this unit really be, and you want to see them compete, and if they don't, it make you a little bit nervous. With the defense, there's just so much coming back that's already known that I don't know that there's a lot I could see that would make me, I'm not sure about this. Like if the offense is lighted up on Saturday, okay, great. It'll make for a fun spring game. It's not going to be something that's going to make me say, oh boy, I don't know if this Notre Dame football team is going to be as good on defense this year. Won't move the needle for me at all because we've seen it. Here's the deal. We're not going to see Riley Mills and Howard Cross in the same team on Saturday. We're not going to see Benjamin Morrison on Saturday. We're not going to see Xavier Watts and Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison and all those guys on the same team, although it's pretty close on the goal secondary. But we're not going to see Xavier Watts and Christian Gray and Adon Schuler on the same team with your starting linebackers and your starting defensive line. So it really doesn't – it's nothing that's going to concern me. If anything, the things that I'm looking for on Saturday are things that can make me even more excited about the defense because of what I had mentioned in the previous segment. There's just so much young talent that to a degree, I'll speak for myself. And I'm curious if you guys feel the same way. But for me, I think the defense is going to be really good. I think this is going to be a top 10 to 12 defense minimum this season. What determines if they're top 10 or top 5 or top 3 is more so going to be, what do the young guys do? How good are the young guys? It's not going to be like, because you've got Riley Mills and Howard Cross and Jack Kaiser and Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison. I'm just kind of going front to back. Jordan Clark, Jordan Patel, RJ Open, the proven commodities are why I think you're going to be a top 10 team on defense. That's why I have no doubt that they're going to be top 10 defense, top 10 to 12 defense. And I'd probably say top 10. I'm just being a little bit cautious with top 12 because I haven't like broken down every defensive roster that's coming back next year. So I'm just trying to show a little bit of grace, but I'd be surprised if they're not a top 10 defense coming back this next season because they were borderline top 5 last year. Statistically, they were certainly top 5, but in some other efficiency numbers, they were 6 or 7. So clearly top 10, and I fully expect them to be top 10 this year again, even though they lost some players. Well, so did everybody else. But whether or not they can be that top 5 again, whether they can either repeat last year or even be better than last year, which is possible, a lot of that's going to come down to some younger players. And that's not just freshmen. That means younger guys that have to step in. It's going to come down to some newcomers that have to step up, and this is going to be our chance to see some of those guys shine. So there's certainly some things that I'm going to be looking for here this weekend from the Notre Dame defense. For me, it begins with the edge. That's really the position that I'm looking for the most. And I'll get into specific players here in a little bit because it's going to come down to some newcomer stuff. But some of the veterans that I want to see really perform well. Look, Jordan Patel playing great in the spring game doesn't guarantee that he's going to play great in the fall. But wouldn't it be nice to at least still see that in the spring game, to see him have some success, against Sullivan Absher and Emil Wagner? I mean, I don't say you have to go have 5 sacks on Saturday, but you're playing against the number 2 offensive tackles for Notre Dame. I want to see you perform well. If he performs well, does that mean Jordan Patel is poised for a 10-sack season? No, it doesn't. But it'll make me feel a little bit better, especially if we see him winning with things that aren't always there for him. Does he have secondary moves? Does he show that great burst that we've seen from him in the past that he didn't show last year? Or is he just kind of a magnet on tackles, just running right down the middle of them? I'm curious to see that. And so I want to get into that. I'm sorry, y'all, for those who are listening via podcast. USMA 87 just had one of my favorite posts of the day. Normally, I don't react to those things, but that was very funny. Very well played, my friend. Very, very well played. Getting back on track, there's other guys, too, that are coming back. I want to see how Josh Burnham does. I've heard a lot about how he's played this spring and how good he's looked. I want to see what he does on Saturday against Charles Jagasaw. And actually, no, wait a minute. Which team is Josh? Josh is on the gold team, right? Yes, Josh is on the gold team. So kind of similar thing from him. I want to see how he does against Sullivan Absher and those guys. I want to see him making plays. It's going to make me feel a lot better about where they are. I want to see Junior. I hear so many good things from people around the program about Junior Tuihalamaka. We didn't see it at all last year, and we haven't seen it in the games we've seen this spring. He made a great play early in the scrimmage last week, and then I didn't see him really do anything again the rest of the scrimmage. But I hear really good things. I want to see it, right? It would be great to see it and to see him have some success this weekend. And especially when you consider the fact that him and Patelho and Burnham are not going against the first-team tackles. If they get shut down on Saturday, and this is the hard part of a scrimmage, right? Because the one way to look at it is the pessimistic view. Man, how did Burnham and Patelho and Tuihalamaka not have success against Sullivan Absher and Emil Wagner, who are your backup tackles? That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, hey, what a great job the young tackles Sullivan Absher and Emil Wagner did, right? But that's the problem when you're playing yourself is if somebody wins, that means somebody loses. If somebody makes a play, it means somebody got beat. And so I'm curious to see that. But I feel like if those guys are going to be breakout players, we should see some glimpses of it on Saturday. It's not an end-all be-all, but it'd be nice to see that a little bit. But the other part of it, too, is just more big picture. The edge rush. Look, establishing safety depth is the personnel thing that needs to get most addressed on defense. But from a performance standpoint, the edge providing more pass rush than last season is a must if this is going to be a truly elite defense. The defensive end position was very good last year when it comes to putting pressure on the quarterback. The Viper position was a major problem last year. And I want to see that group be more effective and more successful. We're going to see Boubacar get his chance against the starting tackles. That's going to be huge. We're going to see RJ Oben get a chance against the starting tackles. That's going to be huge. We're going to see Bryce Fisher get a chance. That's going to be huge. And how do they perform? Do they show those flashes? Do they show that speed? I have not been overly impressed with RJ Open so far this spring. Now, I'm chalking it up to he's making a much different scheme fit transition than what Javonte Jean-Baptiste did. And remember, Javonte Jean-Baptiste didn't do a whole lot last spring either. He didn't even practice half the time. He got to the fall, and his experience, he got comfortable in the system, and he balled out in the fall. That's all I care about. So I don't necessarily care if RJ Oben plays well or not in this spring game. It's just more confirmation. Okay, I know what he did at Duke, but can he do that at Notre Dame? Hey, it's nice to see him getting off the line with speed. It's nice to see him making plays because I haven't seen a whole lot from him this spring. And so he's in the guy. I want to see Bryce Young making plays. And so if they can provide some pass rushing flashes on Saturday, that's going to be an encouraging thing. Now, I don't want to see them just dominating the whole game because that's going to be problematic for the offensive line. But I do want to see those flashes because that's from an execution standpoint, from a production standpoint, that's my biggest concern about the defense. Okay, we know they're going to be here and really good, but can they be elite? It's going to be the Viper position especially, but the two edge positions, defensive end and then Viper have to give more impactful pass rushing production next season. Not sacks per se, but effective pass rushing production. Hits, pressures, hurries, tip balls, sacks, things along those lines. I need to see all of it. It's all part of being more effective when it comes to putting pressure on the quarterback. It's not just sacks. It's the whole aspect of it. So I'm looking forward to that. Next is linebackers. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm super fired up about this linebacking core. Way more than I should be. I mean, you're talking about Jack Kaiser's been a good player at Notre Dame for the last 3 years. He hasn't been a star. He's been a good football player. And then after him, it's a bunch of, I don't know. I don't know what Jalen Snead is going to be. I don't know what Drake Bowen is going to be. I don't know what Jaden Osbury is going to be. I don't know what Kingston's going to be. I don't know what Preston Center is going to be. I don't know what Kahano Kia is going to be. I have no idea because we've never seen those guys really be put in positions where they can be effective. Jalen Snead has been, but he hasn't really played all that well. So this is going to be our chance to see it. And I'm just kind of watching them, looking forward to watching them run around. The production will be great, but I'm just looking forward to watching these guys fly around. I would encourage you guys to focus on this position a little bit on Saturday because I think I want to hear from you all watching the game when we get to the post-game show. I want to hear from you guys if you see it the way that we see it in practice. If you guys agree with us, because like Vince and I have talked about this, Sean Davis and I have talked about this, like, man, these linebackers can move. These guys can run. I want to know what you guys think about it when you get your chance to see them up close. And that's what I'm hoping that Al Golden is still aggressive and turns them loose and just doesn't sit back and, play read and react defense just because it's a spring game. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm just saying that would be the thing that prevents us from really seeing that. But I want to see it because I really, really think this group has a chance to be excellent. And if they play great in the spring game, it doesn't guarantee anything, but it'll certainly leave me feeling confirmed and excited about what I think can be true is going to be true because it's a group with a ton of talent. It really is a ton of talent. I want to see Drake Bowen and Kingston making a ton of plays inside. I want to see Jaden Osbury get his chances outside. I'd love to see him get some chances inside too. But, that's a kid that every time I talk to a source in Notre Dame, they're like, this kid, I don't know when his time is going to come, but it's going to come at some point, and this kid's going to make a ton of plays at Notre Dame. Jalen Snead, hearing good things about him this spring. Didn't hear a lot of good things about him as much last spring from some of my sources, but he's had a really good spring. I just want to see them put it together, make some plays, be impactful. I really want to see that from this group on Saturday because it's a really talented group. Christian Gray is another guy I'm looking forward to. Just where they're going to play him. Are they going to put him in the boundary? Are they going to put him to the field? The boundaries where he's played a lot this spring. The field is where he's probably going to start in the fall once Benjamin Morrison gets back. So where do they play him? Do they play him at both? And he's had a really good spring. He's been very good every practice we've been at so far. Would love to see him kind of conclude the spring on a high note. But the other part of the side of it is I want to see who's able to beat him on Saturday. Because if any of the receivers are actually able to beat Christian Gray, that's going to tell me something about the receivers, because Christian Gray has just been so good. Like the evolution of him in my eyes as a prospect and now as a player has really changed a lot. His junior film, I had him as a top 150 player because I saw a kid that was long. I saw a kid that was smart. I saw a kid that was pretty smooth. There were some things to like, but I just didn't see great player. I didn't see the speed to really be that next level guy. And then he went out that summer, and I don't know if you guys remember when I talked about this. He went out that summer, and he ran like a 4.41 and a 4.42 at Ohio State. And I said, look, that's great. I hope that's true, but I just don't see that on film. I don't see that kind of speed on film. I didn't see it from him as a junior. But you're like, there's a reason that Notre Dame wants him so bad. There's a reason that Ohio State and LSU wanted him so bad. And I'm like, that's great. And that's confirmation of why Notre Dame's after him. But again, I just didn't see elite player on film. And then a senior year came. And you saw the same smooth athlete. You saw the same long kid. You saw the same smart kid. But the difference was now as a senior, that speed flashed constantly. And then watching him as a senior going against Ryan Wingo and Aaron Scott and Cardinal Tate and Jeremiah McClellan, who was a Jeremiah Love teammate in high school, and just shut all these dudes down. You're like, okay, he went from good player, glad Notre Dame's gonna, might get him, to wow, you have a dude, and I can't wait for the day that him and Benjamin Morrison are playing together. It's been fun to watch, to the point now where it's like I look at him in practice the way that I do Benjamin Morrison, in that if a receiver beats him, you're like, hey, like brownie points because you just beat Benjamin Morrison or you just beat Christian Gray. He's been that good. So I'll be watching him a decent amount on Saturday because he is part of the gold team. And I want to see him against either Chris Mitchell or Deion Colsey. And if those guys can make some plays against him, even if they're not getting the ball thrown, but just show me that you can get open at times or even give me some level of separation, that's going to mean a lot to me and say a lot to me about those receivers. So that's why I'm going to be watching Christian Gray. It's not even going to be that I want to see Christian Gray play well because I just kind of assume it now. It's, can anybody do anything against him? And if you can, then that gives me great optimism about what this group is going to be able to do in the fall. Because I'm telling you guys right now, when Benjamin Morrison gets back, there may only be 2 or 3 teams in the entire country where I'm going to say that the Notre Dame receivers are going to face somebody better than this duo. Maybe 2 or 3 teams, especially from just a pure man coverage standpoint. When Benjamin Morrison's back, him and Christian Gray, when they're on the field together, are special. And I want to see kind of who is able to maybe challenge Christian on Saturday, or can they? Can anyone do that? I'm looking forward to seeing that. Safeties is another position. Obviously, I was very glad to see that Xavier Watson and Don Schuler are going to be on the field together, at least to start, because that's the anticipated, potential starting lineup next year. I want to see how they perform. I want to see how Luke Talich performs. He's going to get a lot of chances on Saturday. Big spring game opportunity for Luke Talich to go out there and play a bunch of snaps, make some plays, and show that, hey, look, yes, it's great that Adon's playing well. Xavier's that dude. We're glad to have Rod Hurd, but hey, coach, don't forget about me. You got to find a role for me too, because I can make plays. I can be a playmaker. It's a huge chance for Luke Talich. I think he's a guy that could, him and Adon both stepping up this season is going to be huge for Notre Dame, present and future. Because in the present, it means you're at least 4 deep there once Rod Hurd shows up. You've got Xavier Watts. You've got Rod Hurd. You've got a Don Schuler, and then if you get Luke Talich, you're feeling really good about your current safety depth chart. But it also gives you some optimism going into 2025 because, folks, remember, Xavier's done after this year. Rod Hurd's done after this year. They're gone. So in 2025, the starters at safety are either going to be one of the current sophomores, one of the current freshmen, one of the current rising high school senior commits, Ivan Taylor, Ethan Long, perhaps Jadon Blair, if he joins in the class at some point down the road, we'll see, or a transfer. It's they're going to have a new look at safety next season in some capacity. So the more Adon and Luke step up now, the better position they're going to be next year to be those guys that are the standard bearers of the position. Meaning, if a Bronte Johnson or an Ivan Taylor or any other young safety or a transfer wants to start, those are the standard bearers you have to beat out. And that's really where you want to be. And I'm looking forward to seeing if they can become that group. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Adon. But we've kind of seen a lot from Adon this spring. It'd be nice to see him finish off as well as he's played throughout the spring. For me, it's more so, does anybody else flash? Does Luke Talich flash? Does Ben Minnick flash? He's going to get a lot of chances on Saturday. Does Kennedy Urlacher flash? I'm going to be watching Kennedy in coverage and see what he can bring to the table a little bit from a coverage standpoint. So there's a lot to see from the safeties. And I want to see them tackle well. I want to see them handle coverage effectively. I want to see if they can make plays on the football. There's a lot to see from that group on Saturday. And then the last part, and this is always kind of the fun of a spring, is I want to see the new guys. I want to see the transfers, RJ Oben and Jordan Clark. What do they look like? I haven't seen a lot from them this spring. With RJ, I've seen him a decent amount. I just haven't been blown away by him. With Jordan, I just haven't seen him a lot. He missed that first practice. I haven't paid a lot of attention to him in the drills because it's drills. The defense doesn't do as much in the open periods that we are at as the offense does. He showed me some good flashes on the spring game. In the spring scrimmage last week. Had a nice little edge pressure unblocked. Did a nice job in perimeter, but we didn't see a ton of him. This is another chance to see him. I'm looking forward to seeing him. And then, of course, the freshmen and the redshirt freshmen or sophomores. But I'm more focused on the guys who haven't played yet. So I'm talking about Bryce Young, Kingston Villama-Asa, Kennedy Urlacher, Sean Sevillano. Can Sean Sevillano build on the performance I thought he had in the spring scrimmage? That's very, very interesting. I'm very curious to see if he can do that. I thought he did some good things. Can he build on that? Can Devin Houston, who's a redshirt freshman, show us a little something in the game on Saturday? Can Brennan Vernon, if he gets a chance, show that he's a guy that should be playing more, getting more opportunities? Cole Mullins, I still don't understand why he's inside, but maybe he goes inside on Saturday and balls out, makes a lot of plays. We'll see. But I'm just looking forward to seeing the young guys run around especially on defense, because it was such a interesting defensive class where you loved parts of it. Other parts were maybe could be really good, but the guys that are on campus now are really talented and or intriguing at the very least when you talk about like a Kennedy Urlacher. What are they going to be able to show? Very much looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing that part of it. So those are the things I'm looking for on Saturday, offensively and defensively. Curious what you guys are hearing about. And then, when you watch, if you guys at all think about the things I'm talking about, I want to hear what you guys thought of those things when we do the post-game show on Saturday. That's going to be a lot of fun as well. It'll be Vince and I after the game. We'll come back home and we'll talk about all those type of things. Before I go, I did have a super chat earlier from Aaron Schmidt. Aaron, thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate that very much. He goes, Aaron says, I know Ian Book broke records, but is Steve Angeli the same player or better? Well, the only record that I remember Ian Book breaking was the most wins by a starter, which is a longevity award more so than it being a record that you're breaking that has to say a lot about your performance. It has more to do with, who did you play with? What kind of teams are you on? So there's a lot there. Is Steve Angeli better than Ian Book? Right now, no. Could he end up being better? Maybe. here's why I'm a little hesitant, and I've been back and forth on this a little bit. I'll say this. Steve, in certain situations, shows me a little bit more risk taking than what the older Ian Book showed. But Ian showed that as a young player as well. I mean, you go back to 2018, Ian was much more willing to throw the ball down the field than he was in 2019 or 2020. But Steve also shows some tendencies that reminded me a lot of when it started to turn in a direction that I didn't love with Ian, where Ian went from an aggressive, take chances, RPO throwing, post-game throwing player during the regular season in 28 that was completing 70+% of his passes and averaging about 300 yards a game. And, was a really good player in 2018 to a guy that was utterly unwilling in almost all situations of taking any risk whatsoever. And Steve shows some of that. He showed some of that in the scrimmage this past week. He showed some of that in team periods this past spring. And so I need to make sure that Steve is not that. As far as physical talent, Steve Angeli is bigger than Ian Book was, but he doesn't have better physical talent than Ian. Ian Book threw the ball a lot better, and I've said this for years. He threw the ball a lot better than a lot of Notre Dame fans realized because of his unwillingness to take chances. Ian's problem was never physical, in my opinion. There were some limitations at times because of his height and overall size that he couldn't do certain things. But, Ian was a guy, like you remember the play last year against Ohio State, the 4th and 1, where Sam Hartman kind of went to the sideline, just kind of took a hit and then didn't get the first down. Ian Book had a play similar to that against USC in 2020. No, it was 2018 when he was his first year as a starter. It was a 3rd down play, and Ian completely sacrificed his body to try to get the first down, and he got it on a 3rd down in a game that Notre Dame had to come from behind. And that was something that you were always going to see from him. I mean, he was a kid that was going to be willing to do all those type of things. And so there were some of those things that Ian was really good at. He could make a lot of plays with his legs. He could scramble around, do a lot of things in that regard that I don't think Steve can do. But the other part is I just think he just threw a really nice ball. It's just as he got older and older and older, he became less and less risk averse, or more and more, I should say, risk averse. I think I'm using that phrase properly in that context, where he just wasn't willing to take chances and wasn't willing to make mistakes. And the best Ian Book ever looked his last 2 years was late in games when they were behind. You think of the Clemson game in 2018. You think of the Virginia Tech game 2020, excuse me. You think of the Virginia Tech game in 2019. I think of the Pitt game in 2019, where you're watching this game and you're thinking, if this version of Ian Book would have played the whole game, this team might have won this game by 30. But he would just go through these periods where he just wouldn't take those same chances until he had to. Late in the game, he had no choice, and then he looked great. So I always felt Ian Book was physically more talented than he was given credit for. Ian's problems were not physical as much as they were here, and a little bit here in regard to just the decision-making, the processing of information. I think Steve processes information a little bit quicker than Ian did post-snap, but still shows some of that unwillingness to take some risks this spring. Now, is that just the circumstance of the spring? Is that the beginning of a change that we saw with Ian? I don't know. But I don't know that Steve is I don't believe that Steve is physically better than him. But could he be as productive as Ian? Could he have a similar record as a starter as Ian? Absolutely. Look, if Steve Angeli is a starting quarterback at Notre Dame, I still expect them to be a double-digit win team. And if they had the same schedule Notre Dame played in 2020, I would expect them to also be 10-0. The question with him is the same question that we have with, Ian Book and some other quarterbacks that Notre Dame's had in the past. There's no question that they're on teams that are very good, that they can get to the playoff with and things along those lines. And I would argue top to bottom, this team has more talent than the 2020 team did, top to bottom. No question. I mean, Ian Book's last year, he led Notre Dame to a 10-0 record in the regular season with Ben Skoranek and Javon McKinley and Avery Davis as his top 3 pass catchers. Now, those are quality football players, but They don't have the God-given ability of Chris Mitchell and Jaden Greathouse and Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert and Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas and guys like that. I mean, they just don't. And they certainly don't have the depth that this group has. So it's just with Ian, he wasn't going to beat Clemson. Not 2018 Clemson, not 2020 Bama. He just wasn't the kind of guy that could go out there and put a team on his shoulders and win those games. And I don't believe Steve is either. And that's why I've kind of focused on other guys. I do think Kenny can be that guy. I think CJ can be that guy. Will they show it? Don't know. We need to see it. But I think they at least have the tools to be that guy. And I don't know that Steve does. And that's really where it comes down to. But could Steve Angeli win a lot of football games in Notre Dame? Yeah, of course. Of course. He's a smart kid, tough kid, confident kid. Players love and respect him. So there's a lot of things that he has that could make him think that he could go out and win a lot of games. I just don't see him as a guy that can take you over the hump as a quarterback. I just don't. And if he is, I will thoroughly enjoy watching him prove me wrong. Very much so. So that's going to do it, everybody. Thank you for being with me today. I appreciate y'all so much. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll go 1 o'clock tomorrow. So the solo shows have been going 2 o'clock. I think that's going to be a permanent thing moving forward. I'm not quite sure on that, but that's what I'm leaning towards right now. The Friday show, the mailbag tomorrow, will be a 1 p.m. start time. Ryan and I will be with you guys talking, answering all your questions tomorrow on the mailbag. Saturday after the game, Vince and I will hustle back after the game, and we will break down everything we saw. We will go live after the game. It'll be a normal post-game show. We'll talk about everything that we saw, offense, defense. We'll talk about all those type of things. If you guys have super chats, we'll bring those up. Talk about those things as well if you have them. And then we'll be back on Monday with another mailbag. So we'll have a post-game mailbag on Monday. So we'll be back to normal Monday, a mailbag, Friday recruiting hour, and all that kind of good stuff. And then we hope to kind of kick off I will make sure that by Tuesday, I've decided what the new format's going to be for the shows, and I'll announce it to all you guys, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So just a little hint, there's going to be a weekly film breakdown session of high school recruits. It won't be like Notre Dame film. That's going to be for the premium board only, but I'm going to break down either certain players or position groups from high school kids, Notre Dame commits, Notre Dame targets, all that kind of stuff. We'll do that once a week for a segment. It won't be a whole show. It'll be a segment at the end of a show. We're going to have a buy, sell, hold segment each week. I'm thinking Wednesday, but I'm not quite sure on that, where message board people will get to ask buy, sell, hold questions. I'll bring those up on the show and answer those as a final segment on the show. Still trying to figure out what some of the other segments are going to be, accepting feedback on those on the message board. We have a thread on that. So if you're message board members, check that out. And let me know what you guys think about that. So we're gonna kick that off next week. It'll definitely take us through the summer. Some of these segments we anticipate going into the fall as well, but at least we'll have our summer schedule all set. So I'm looking very, very, very much forward to that. So have an awesome rest of your day, folks. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, not just physically, but with your friends and family who are Notre Dame fans. And if they're not Notre Dame fans, but they like good football talk and they're fans of other teams, also let them know what we're doing. And as always, sign up for the message board, folks. Support Irish Breakdown at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have an awesome rest of your day. IB Nation Sports Talk tonight at 6 o'clock. Mailbag tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Post-game show on Saturday. Enjoy the game, everybody, and we'll talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.